everyone has a chance to get a home. It's like Robin's probably going to bring up something about smaller homes in a little bit here. We have to look at every aspect and give everybody a chance to live in this town. We just can't say, okay, this town is just for the middle class, just for people with your idea of a house. Everyone has a right to a home. And there has been a study. He's probably checked into it, and this is part of that study that we're lacking in compared to other communities. So otherwise, he wouldn't even be doing this, because if there wasn't that clientele out there that are looking for a place to stay like this, he wouldn't be building them, because he'd be sitting on top of something that isn't worth a lot. So anyway, we'll take this into consideration at this point. I will close this public hearing. And then we're going to have a motion here and a little discussion amongst the group.
Make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Motion is been made and seconded. Any discussion here? Looks like we got
Well,
go ahead.
comprehensive plan, they got that area laid out. And we look at the little map, 1 to 3 units per acre. We got 8.8, so you got 9 acres. 9 times 3 is 27. We're looking for 31.
According to the comprehensive plan.
Right.
Okay.
I guess, like I said, I look at it as this way, at least that we're controlling what goes into that. I shouldn't say we're controlling. At least that way it's a planned unit. It's not every lot is going to be different. You're going to end up with less units per acre or per this whole area than you would if they divided it into lots and built townhomes, or twin homes, excuse me.
And as a crumb deal, no one wanted it in my neighborhood either, but the same didn't happen. It's unfortunate. But I agree with, it seems to me there would be less with this scenario. Roach said, more trees this way. Traffic, I mean, you can do this with all of the duplexes. I know there are a lot of duplexes, maybe not a lot, but there are some duplexes in that area. Fourplexes.
Doesn't fit. Doesn't fit into the house.
Any more discussion?
Sure.
Motion?
Just to point out that if you don't, you can establish certain setbacks that are special to this development if you like. If you don't, then it just defaults to what's in the staff report there, which would be 20 foot from the front yard, be the road or drive, and that one portion that's on Riverwood. 10 foot to the rear yard setback, and 15 feet to a side yard.
What about this right?
So the roaches considered the front?
Mr. Smith?
In this case, the shortest road
I think the
frontage.
city council would have to look at.
The road with the side.
Which would be how
What
long?
we're doing is we're making a decision on what exists as far as. Any other discussion? Okay, again, just to remind you, this is just a recommendation board. The city council is going to hear plenty about this. Mr. Smith brought in an item from the Mississippi Headwaters. Even before the city council could approve that, they would have to go through this. They would have to go through this, and if there's anything that's going to infringe on that headwater, if you know anything about the DNR and stuff, they're not going to allow it. So that ties everybody's hands.
Mr. Frank,
Yes.
I just think too that one of the things that got emphasized at the beginning of this meeting is that we had a previous agreement, and that previous agreement would be broken with what's happening now. So what I wanna say. It's just like the Indians. I mean, the Indians can still do what they want with what they got. They can still get their poundage off of Mille Lacs because there was an agreement. They're not breaking that agreement. I feel like if we change this and go with this, I also know roaches. I think roaches are nice people, really nice people. But if my own mother was gonna do this, I would be against her. It's not right. It's not right for the area. It doesn't fit.
Point well taken.
Oh, one other question. You know, you guys all stood up, you're all opposed to doing this development. So how many of you guys would be in favor of them lotting and blocking it off? If you want to come in and lot and block it? Not one of you would be in favor, right?
You didn't ask the question, but you didn't give us an opportunity to answer that question.
Well, that's not part of this meeting.
No, I'm just curious. On lot and block.
But we have to see the proposal in order, and that wasn't the proposal.
And we won't
told
see
that
it.
has
Yeah.
no value.
That would be
Right,
another
so
one.
it's not even a question to ask.
So my guess is a majority of you guys.
You
are
can't
wanting
guess
to
what
let
we
it
would,
like
you
as a
can't
field.
guess what we
That's why
would
everybody's
think.
against it.
That's your guess.
What happens
Right.
if you can't fill 38 places for $1,000 a month?
Then somebody's paying property taxes
Yeah.
on them.
Then you start getting them subsidized and they start,
I just wondering, I don't know, just wondering, because I'm wondering where 38 families, they could pay $1,000 a month now with 31 a weekend.
1,500.
I'm just, I don't know.
Just wait a minute. What's gonna happen here is we're gonna keep bringing this up and it's gonna keep going because there's a lot of people here that are in disagreement. And, we should stay on task, on topic.
We got a motion and a
Let's-
second.
There's a motion and seconded. As far as the opposition, right now, I can see, like I mentioned earlier, everyone in the audience, except for one or two out there, are in opposition. And we've taken that to heart, you know. We have to make a decision right now, and I'm gonna make a call on how we're gonna vote for this thing. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion does not carry. Now comes the good news. City council still can make the decision here. They're gonna hear everything we heard tonight, because when that's brought up before the city council, that's gonna be noted. All the things we discussed. But now you need to call your city council people, and you need to discuss this with them. Okay.
There's 2 council people right here.
We need to continue our meeting. You need to go outside, please, if you're gonna discuss things.
We have some more things on the agenda we have to get through tonight. Thanks, have a good night.
Thank you. Thank you all, gentlemen. Have a good evening.
No problem.
I'd like to go on to other things.
But I agree with you about segregating. I think if the habitat for humanity, when they're in there, more accepted than if you have one area, people don't want to.
No matter what they're paying, I just think
That's
that
part of public record.
it makes more sense to people, put people in regular, you know, mix them in, yeah.
They have the majority.
Majority of what?
It's a legal petition. Once it's finalized,
Oh, okay, I thought there was a number it has to be.
No.
Okay.
But, you know, it's like if we do a road,
Without this camera, there's no.
in order for people to petition against for a road, you'd have to have a certain percentage.
Oh, maybe that's what I'm thinking, okay.
Well, you can have one person petition it, but to get the majority for a 5/8, one person can come and petition the road and say,
Mr. Smith could have came in because he owns 70% of the bike, well, not 70. He owns 1/4 of the property along that stretch. He wouldn't have enough to petition on his own.
Oh, okay. But there again, the more signatures make it more.
Robin, we gotta leave the door open. Robin, we gotta leave the door open or it's closed door meeting.
Okay,
You've already shut to the during council meeting.
next item, any old business?
To me, that's closed doors. I guess I don't know what the technicalities are. To me,
I think that
somebody must come in and
door,
out. It's not locked, I guess. So I guess
right.
they can come in and
I
out.
think it can be closed. I was just gonna close it because of the noise.
Focus.
New business, discussion of tiny homes and small lots. Okay, Ben, what do you have for us?
This comes from the council, they were directed us to look into this issue. So I didn't have a lot of specifics to go on in terms of what the actual request was, but I've kind of come up in some other communities that I've worked in a little bit. And I think there's, in my opinion, there's two issues. The main issues, I think, is one is the issue of small lots and, these lots that are smaller than today's standards and what happens with those. We had some discussion on that a few months back. If you recall, where there was a landowner who had called me, or a potential landowner, I think it was, asking about developing a small lot that was not meeting today's standards. And so some people have suggested that it's a good way to get some infill, to allow some development on those lots. And the other side of it is usually that it doesn't, it would be too much crowding and those kinds of things. And so you get into those kinds of things. Somewhat related to that, but also somewhat distinct as an issue, is the issue of what's called tiny homes. And these are homes that are usually maybe 200-300 square feet or even smaller. And there's, I put some articles in the packet there, you can kind of see how people are looking at those kinds of things. Usually it's people that are trying to simplify their lives, or it's an affordable housing option, or whatever it might be. They're looking to build what I think would be considered very small homes by the standards that we've had for the last numbers of years, and put them on lots. And so it's a little bit tough. Most ordinances that I see, including ours, have a minimum size house that's required. Either 24 by 24 in Little Falls or 24 by 30, depending on where the ordinance you're looking at, what district it's in. So the issue of tiny homes is usually about allowing for smaller homes.
So it's kind of a chicken egg thing. Do we change the ordinances first and hope people move in? Or do we allow for variances and then eventually change the ordinance? Or what, in your experience, what do you think? What's that?
Have we had a lot of people that want to live in a tiny house?
I haven't received any requests here in Little Falls. Like I say, in one of my other communities, we got kind of informal requests.
And one of the questions I have, I guess, in regards, I read both the articles, and they didn't, how do they address, like, utilities, whether it's water, whether it's sewer, whether it's electricity? How do they, because I know, like, in one of those articles, they were basically built on a trailer frame. Or I wonder if they were mobile, or I guess that would be my first question is, so say somebody did come in and they wanted to do it, then how can we get them water? How can we get them utilities, I guess?
They'd almost fall in that same category as mobile homes, where you have a lot of property in close proximity with a lot of water services coming in. That's usually provided by the owner of the mobile park.
Yeah.
And we do have, this is different.
We have some of that already. If you look over at the Little Falls cottages on the west side, Limber Drive North. Case in point,
They are tiny.
they are tiny
And there
homes.
used to be some just on the southeast side of column 2. They used to be on the far end, and they were removed so they could build that area up.
Okay.
Oh, the funeral home is now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right.
There used to be
No.
a number of them through there, and they were really close.
But see, most of those are rentals. This is, from what I'm getting from these are people owning these homes. Okay, if I owned a 40-foot lot in Little Falls today, and could I get a variance to build a 10 by 20 house?
You could apply for a variance.
Okay, you could apply for a variance. So
It would be a
basically,
variance from, if you had a small lot too, but you get a variance from that, you get a variance from the minimum size requirements for a house.
and the minimum setback most likely.
Potentially.
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong, that would be allowed in the R4 district. You could do tiny homes that were owner occupied.
R4 or R1?
R4, would be R4. R4 is the mobile home parks.
Oh, okay.
Little Falls condos there.
What about R1?
R1 has
That's
that minimum.
totally different. There's a certain size of property you have to live on.
Okay, but now in the old, what I call the old parts of town, I know that ain't the right terminology, but we have the 40-foot lots.
Yeah.
Non-compliant lots is what we normally call them. Okay, if I own one of those 40-foot lots, couldn't I request a variance to build a small home on that? Okay, so I guess there again, my original question is, do we want to change ordinances, or do we want to start maybe put out that, variances are available if you're so inclined?
I think we're gonna run into this problem a lot in the future, especially on the east side, because there are a lot of houses approaching kind of non-repairable, so they're gonna be probably removed.
And then
Safe to say in the next 10, 20 years here, some of them are barely hanging on right now. So we have to address this. It's good to do it now versus later.
And we've done this in the past, where we've taken the 40-foot lots and the city has bought them or the city has sold them. But what about if there is no next door lot neighbor that wants to sell, or
What we've been doing is the city has been buying them and possibly trying to buy a home next to it.
Yeah,
When it comes
yeah.
to a point where that one needs repair, and then joining
those
and
80-foot.
making compliant lots. But that's a waiting game.
That's a long term.
Sometimes we end up where there was a house put up who bought the property next to them.
Yeah. So then you end up with a 40 in the middle.
We have a corner lot that will never become compliant.
Yeah. Or we have one in the middle that'll never become compliant.
How many of them do we have sitting around?
It's kind of ironic in a way, because in the old days it was a 40-foot lot. They were smaller houses, and now we're kind of doing that whole circle thing.
And the thing, if you go overseas, lots are not as big as here, and houses are scrunched together, especially places like Ireland and England and
China and Japan.
they've had to learn, when they come here, they think we're all living on a ponderosa, because they're not accustomed to seeing houses near the size we have,
And lots near
and lots
the
the
size.
size they are.
Yes.
So, but then days seem to be changing, our population is raising,
Yeah.
and this affordable part, we just made a spiel out here that we're gonna make sure there's housing for everybody and they all have an opportunity. We're not trying to make it difficult to buy homes in Little Falls. Our deal here is give opportunities for people who live in our community actually have a place, And so it's something to look at, I feel. But we still need more information.
Gentlemen back there.
Yes?
Maybe I can comment before I leave. Perhaps you'd want to look into situations in other communities. I believe maybe Bemidji is going through some of this. And just to answer some of your typical questions, I used to build specific units out in the oil field, and that's kind of dried up. But I'm sure you don't want these little homes peppered all over your town. So maybe see what somebody else is doing. Maybe decide to take an older part of town. Look at your lot sizes. Look at your typical house. And yes, to address the question of, are they on wheels most of the time? Utilities, if that lot is being sold, you hook up to the utilities. You don't have a shit tank and a water tank back there. But then look at what you can do with some of these lots. Maybe you can split them. And if you have a district or a certain area that you could put these tiny homes, but I think you're like the Amish. You're trying to put the cart before the horse here. I think you need to gather some more information on what some of the other people are doing, and at least that'll give you an objective to try to form your basis.
Well, that's all we're doing right now.
I
is discussing.
think it's something you need to look at here for the near future, and I think it's good that you're starting. I don't think it's something that has to be on the front burner. But find out your typical size of a small home and then try to make an equation that converts that lot. Because somebody that's trying to do this doesn't want a full big lot, that's defeating the purpose.
Yeah.
So,
Obviously,
first
if
of
you have a
all,
small house, you want a small yard, you want a small.
I guess.
But I'll tell you this, the two articles that I read, there is no consistent size. There is no consistent size of
Well,
house
then
or
maybe you
lot
should
or
be the
whatever.
first to adopt it, but what I'm saying, gather your information and then just try to form a consensus, a objective decision.
That's
If you
what
got
we're
an
trying
X
to
number
do.
of square foot house, how many square foot lot? You got that information now all over the city. You must have something for a house this size, you should have a lot that size. But just keep in mind, these people don't want large grassy lots. They want something small and condensed. So, I don't know if I helped you at all, but I just wanted to
Yeah.
let you know a little bit before I left.
You reassured us we're heading in the right direction anyway.
Oh, I think.
This is our baby step.
Yeah, it's your baby
And
step.
we're thinking about what you were talking about. I was just gonna recommend we have had some discussion with Brainerd a little bit. Robin gave a presentation on some of the stuff that's happening in a neighboring city here.
Put a feeler out, gather that information, see what your park size models are. Do you want to allow park size, or does that have too many square feet? Maybe you can shrink it down, and I guess your first determination is, what do we want for square footage? What is the standard? You don't want 150 square foot, and 90% of the people that are trying to do this are at 220. So I think you got a little more fact finding to do before you do that.
That's true, and this is just a discussion time we're having.
Yeah.
It's not like we're having a public hearing.
Well, I wasn't here specifically for this, but I just thought I'd give you my 2 cents before I left.
And I was gonna ask,
Yeah.
Ben, I drove around the trailer parks we have right now, and there's a lot of vacant spots that haven't been filled in for a long time. There's trailer homes there that probably haven't been lived in for 10 years. There's some real, is this something that, and it's already zoned as an R5, is it R4, R4? Is this something maybe we should bring them in on the discussion and possibly purchasing some of their land to designate because it's already an R4?
Designed for that?
And maybe there's a possibility of getting something going in trailer
Big
parks.
tiny houses. The one on the west side,
But
Limerick.
that was put up, they've been there a long time, even before our ordinance probably.
Yeah.
They've
Can
been
I
there
just
a
add
long
one
time.
thing before I leave? Excuse me for interrupting, but this isn't your alligator pit. This is pretty simple. This is the equation between the lot sizes. It's not gonna take much to figure this out. But where you're gonna have to be careful is somebody building something on a trailer, their own, versus a coded unit that's brought in, so on and so forth. The codes are gonna be different if they have wheels or if they have foundations. I think you don't realize there's 2 types of tiny homes. The ones that have been in the news primarily are something that they can hook on and leave, or hook on and set. They're on wheels, basically. Not always, but just the codes and standards that these things are built to is going to be more of a hassle than you can ever imagine. So that's going to be your issue, not the size of the unit and the size of the lots. Thanks.
Thank you.
I would imagine like some of the older suburbs must be dealing with some of these questions, aren't they?
I'm not going to claim to be an expert on this by any means, but I guess where I've heard of it is usually large cities, like Seattle.
Oh, large.
And Minneapolis is discussing this. Not to say it's not happening elsewhere, maybe they just don't make the news because they're not large cities, but that tends to be where I've been.
Well, Brainerd isn't that much larger than Little Falls now.
So yeah,
Falling in that same category of
No.
cities.
Okay, but now, when we're discussing these tiny homes, or whatever you want to call them, most of the time, these people own these houses, right? this is not a rental property per se.
Again, it could be either or.
Yeah, I suppose it could
We
be.
can't control what the
Yeah.
owner does with that lot.
I think mostly,
But if
part
you're
of the
renting,
idea of it is you own it, it's a cheaper way to own a house and a simpler way of living.
because if you wanted a tiny home, you would move to, I mean, if you wanted to rent a tiny home, it'd be kind of similar to living in an apartment. Well, of course, I suppose you have.
I don't think we can control what the owner does with that house once
No.
he has it, if they want to rent it or if they want to live in it.
Yeah, but like he said, he made a good point. If it's a mobile home versus a home, the whole building code is a whole different story.
Right.
That we have a little more
Yeah.
say-so.
That's true.
Man, I guess, isn't a new term manufactured housing, or is that's not even?
Well, okay, so a couple things with it. I talked to the building inspector for the city, and he said that because it's a dwelling, it's subject to the building code. When you talk about manufactured housing, that could be proven wrong, but my understanding of that at this point is that if HUD puts its stamp on a house, that can be considered a manufactured house. So it has to meet certain requirements that the Department of Housing and Urban Development has, that the federal law, to be considered a manufactured, the traditional mobile home that we think about, single wide mobile home, has to meet certain requirements that are federal requirements. If it doesn't meet those, then I don't know what you can manufacture. It's going to be considered a code or a house that's subject to every other code.
And I know that code has changed nationally, because they used to make these things almost paper thin,
Yeah.
but now they have certain insulation.
Energy codes and stuff
Energy
like that.
codes, yeah.
So the building inspector would, would have a say in I think almost all of these, if not all of them.
How the ordinance would be written if we get to that point.
Why did the city come up with a 24 by 24 as a minimum home size? Just out of curiosity, I mean, was there any, obviously that was probably done eons ago, but.
Well, you had to come up with something, I suppose.
Yeah, I suppose you had to have a number, so that was a good number, yeah.
Yeah, I've seen that in a lot of ordinances. Usually it's minimum 24 feet. I think most of those came in about the 70s, which, when you look at the quality of mobile housing in the 70s,
I would have to-
manufactured housing.
I would have to guess it was just bigger than a double wide trailer.
There you go.
Would be my suspicion.
Okay,
I mean, you can get double wide trailers 24 feet wide now,
yeah.
so you can meet those requirements. But yeah, I think, the issue, we touched on it a little bit tonight, indirectly, but, the character of the neighborhood certainly comes into play, the quality of housing, the safety of housing.
Comprehensive plan, everything comes
I
into
don't want
play.
somebody putting a trailer next to me calling it a little house in
Yeah.
my neighborhood either.
Okay, fish are basically a ice castle would be.
There we go, they could use my house.
It's something that needs to be looked into, and you're right, it's probably down the road, it's a good time to start looking. And eventually we have to deal with the vacant lots.
Yeah, that, like I said, to me, this is, I should say it's an answer, but it's a step in the right direction. If you have a 40-foot lot in the city of Little Falls that obviously you can't build on, you can't build this size of house, maybe this would be an alternative to make that still a viable part of the city. Because all those 40-foot lots have sewer and water.
No.
Yeah, well, I should say, they did originally once upon a time.
Once upon a time, they would have, I would say in the areas that we, do reconstruction of, we estimate how big the lots are, or how many 80-foot wide lots they can fit in that particular area. So,
Okay.
I'm thinking of one area in southeast part of town where it was planned that 50-foot wide lots. Not each one of those lots has sewer or water service.
Oh,
Just
I thought they would. Okay,
No, because the property owner is going to be assessed for all of those. And those, you can imagine, they're not going to want to
yeah.
pay if they're not going to build them.
And the idea of changing the neighborhood is really not gonna affect that, because everything in the neighborhoods are small to begin with.
Yeah, exactly. Or
Not
there
to
again,
improve
you
on
talk about the
neighborhood.
character of the neighborhood, but
Yeah.
would you rather have a vacant lot next to you, or at least have somebody living there? So, is it considered a neighborhood if every second lot is empty?
I know a lot of people like vacant lots next to their properties, so they got this free area that I don't have to pay taxes on.
Right.
So,
But somebody does.
well, on this one, it's a burden on the city,
Yeah.
is what it is, because we have to maintain it,
Would it make
protect
sense?
it.
Would it make sense to find out how many 40-foot lots there are?
Lots
calls?
and lots and lots.
I mean, is it 25%, is it 50% of the
Is
lot?
that, no,
I don't think it's as many as you.
Isn't it? Okay, and maybe it isn't either, you know.
maybe this is something the council has to direct, or, I don't know.
It's part of this background. I think
Yeah.
if you want, I look at this as a starting point for discussion like we talked about. So I think if we're gonna move forward, what do you want us to look into? Is it how many 40-foot lots? Is it how many?
Is
other
it we need to
cities
change
do
the
this?
ordinances, is we need,
A couple example ordinances from other communities that have dealt with this.
Well, I think that, maybe just how many non-compliant ones, right?
Yeah.
Not necessarily 40-foot.
yeah, that's probably your,
Maybe just non-compliant lots.
non-compliant lots. Yeah, because there could be a lot of 40-foot lots, but the neighbor, they own two of them together and then.
Right.
That kind of
And
thing.
box 43 opens up.
Mr. President, can I, excuse me, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Sure.
May I make a comment since the issue was brought up by myself? I'm looking at, thank you for whoever provided this information in the packet. I am going to look into this one article by Grist. But my main concern is, I think there are countless city-owned lots in this town now that are unoccupied, unbuildable. That's a burden on the city. There's no revenue coming from them. And small houses, my home, if it didn't have an upper level, I think would almost be considered a small home. Isn't a 25 by 25 foot house a 500 square foot house? Or 10 by 50? My house is about 24 by 26. So, and I could comfortably, if I didn't have so much baggage, I could easily live on my lower level. I wouldn't need the upstairs and I wouldn't need the basement. But the basement is a good safety factor. But there's a lot of people living in a home that size already in this city and around lakes and all throughout the state. That's not a tiny home. I don't know that, I mean, I think the issue of tiny homes, especially the ones on trailers, wouldn't be suitable in some areas, and that could devalue properties. There's a potential for that anyway. But I think it's reasonable to ask the city to look into, for the taxpayers' sake, because this is city's owned by everybody,
Well,
including
that's
myself.
basically what we just said, we're gonna look at non-compliant lots.
Well,
Would be
but
one
city-owned non-compliant lots. That is the reason why I brought this forward. Those are a tax burden on everyone else. And it makes sense to utilize them by allowing homes to be built that would fit those lots now, that could be sold off, maybe developed by a person like sitting next to me here, by Mr. Roach. Why not do that? From this article, it states, let's say it together now, sprawl is not sustainable. Great cities versus suburbs rivalry and why it matters. Unused space in cities is not an option we can afford. If those lots, some or all of them, if there was a house that was built on those today, it's more income for the city.
But now the other thing is though too, we have to realize with all these, we're talking about a limited market. Because
Well-
if you're talking a small home, okay, for example, a newlywed couple could probably live in there comfortably. But now they have a child or two, then we're looking at something different. So the other thing we'd have to kind of look at this is, what's the sustainability or the marketability of some of these things?
Well, so I think it's fair that this committee should look into how many maybe somebody already knows the answer. How many city-owned lots are unbuildable because of the size right now?
We just
And
said-
what is the city's plan?
We just said that, unfortunately, it's not our prerogative to do that. The city council would have to recommend, or would have to authorize us, if you whatever word you want to use, to start doing those studies.
Well,
And
no,
if
he just said
Greg
you,
decides to do it on his own because
Oh.
he feels it benefits us and the city council, he can.
Our fact finding.
But there's a lot more to consider. To answer your question, your house is 3 times the size of what we're talking about here as far as
just the lower
ground-
level.
Ground level. Your house is 625 square feet. We're looking, one of the suggestions was a 200 square foot, which is a whole lot smaller. It's 1/3 the size of what you live in right now on your ground level. So,
What are the dimensions of a 500 square one level? What are the dimensions for that?
The minimum 24 by 24 is 576.
Okay, so then 20 by 20 is 500. No, that's 400.
400, yeah.
It falls in between there. Yeah.
22 and a half by 22 and a half.
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
23 by.
yeah. That's a pretty small house.
Brainerd has
This way,
allowed
most
500.
two-car garages are 24 by 24.
But Brainerd City has made the decision to allow 500 last year. Now, there's a reason they did that.
Yeah.
Likely because they're sitting on small lots that they can't sell for any other reason. And I think it's important that,
But there again, I would imagine that a 500 square foot house is gonna have a somewhat limited market. Because there again, if it's more than two people, there's not gonna be enough room for them.
well, it's not, it's up to the person who buys the lot to
I'm
be
saying
able to.
that- What I'm saying is that I don't think we need to build 100 of these and then all of a sudden we find out that there's only a market for about 20 of them.
But you're not building any. The property owner would be. What you're considering is allowing someone to purchase the lot, to build the home on their own and use it for whatever purpose they want.
At this point, the city allows a 476 square foot home if it's 24 by 24. 576, you're right.
So those,
I think it's time to adjourn.
Yeah, carry on. Carry on. Okay, and then there's other considerations, Ben. It was brought up earlier tonight that if we were to put a bunch of these in a certain area and it depreciates the value, lowers the value, not depreciates, lowers the value of the property around it, we can't do that because then they have a right to sue us. So we have to look into that too. So wherever these things would be put, cannot lower the property value of the existing properties around it. That's one thing. Even in Brainerd, they have to comply to that because you cannot do that. It's like if we throw a certain road or something in somewhere and it lowers the property value, they have a right to petition against us to put that in there. So anyway, so something to be brought up as far as this group, we just want to see how many places, possibilities, and what other communities are doing, and then look into as far as structure, you know, and you can bring that back when you get the information. It's not like we need this at the next meeting, but
So-
when you feel you have
You have other things to do.
can I ask one more question, Frank? Are you saying that in Brainerd, on their city-owned lots or wherever a small lot is located, they are not allowed to sell it if the home
They
is
can't put
small?
up any structure in there that would deplete or
Yeah.
lower the.
Brainerd might have completely different ordinance.
Speak for themselves.
Okay.
Well, I don't think that they have an ordinance that would say you couldn't build a 500 square foot in a certain area.
In place,
For their small.
That would sound
for their small
discriminatory to me.
yeah.
You got that? Double
About where?
underline.
Underline in Brainerd.
Yeah, because Brainerd's close, and I'm sure they did some research, you know, our city administrator continually compares us to what he did at Brainerd, so looks like this is
Time for
another case.
payback.
Another case. Okay, any other items?
I make a motion for adjournment. Wow.
All those in favor?
Aye. Need that.
Mr. Roach, I guess if I were you, I'd come to the city council meeting, and I would come in with probably as much information as you have, and,
And maybe do a layout of what it could be with just the duplexes and.
You know, but that's not everybody's request.
I do not want to do it. I got one right here. It's the worst idea ever. It's stupid and pointless. It cuts down every tree. It crowds the setbacks as we just talked about. I mean,
Yeah.
you want to see my layout?
That's,
I do.
that's,
It's like giving the different.
Yeah, I do.
that's the part that I find ironic is, well, it's less in the area than we're hearing.
we're
Yeah,
there.
that's
We don't talk with them, but.
Too much.
Yeah.
Overload.
I don't suppose we can make copies of those, so.
Can we make copies today?
Here.
You have copies? Oh, who's got access to the copies? He needs it for the notes.
If I can get copies of everything, I can.
Great. He needs the original of the two extra copies.
When do you want us to get the copies? You want this one, you mean?
Record one, yeah.
Do you want to come back and give us,
He said he'll drop one on his whole thing.
then we'll give you that. Budget message to this, and wants to this, or?
It's a whole other can of worms.
You know what, I don't need this, if you guys.
Yeah, they give us back.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ruin my books.
Okay.
And what do you mean?
Tell you what, you can do.
He doesn't need to trust you. It's his life.
There's a copy of two pages.
And I want to say,
His name is Terry.
great.
Yeah.
Oh.
I asked him, he looked at me and thought about it.
Mine was on one of them.
Oh, I like that.
It's their land, they can do
That's
it.
right.
8 acres is a pretty decent question.
You're right.
Do you want the charter on that?
No, I'm doing it.
I know.
It's interesting.
Yes, it is.
One thing we can say, Frank, is these meetings are never dull.
Well, one thing I could say is, I totally didn't expect what we had tonight.
Well, I thought it was just ironic that basically everybody's against me. Okay, I get it. We don't want anybody in
See,
our
I've heard
neighborhood.
it both ways. In a way, if the city council would have went with the first petition and just went with that first street order thing, we cleared it all up, because then they petitioned for the whole street. So we dropped that first one, which opened this all up. It would have been done. It would have been done.
Yeah.
But this, that by allowing that extra street addition, even come into play, this is what it opened up.
Yeah, but when there's a cluster like that,
And
like for
it's
instance, at the
went
mobile
back
home
and
parks,
forth.
there's a
Yeah.
requirement that there is a fallout
Because
shelter, some
a week ago, all these
provision
people
for
were in
them.
favor of it. A week ago, all
I was
these people
told
were
that.
in favor of it.
To the ground like a regular.
That's all these people with Mr. Roach and everything, they
I was
walked
just
away from
wondering
there,
where,
they were
I mean,
in
it's
favor
not
of
there,
it.
this
And
is
we're in
in a
petition
lot
to
of
have the whole
homes
street
just
done.
built on the
Tonight,
side.
they
Where in the world do all those
turn
people,
around.
where would be the best place
What
for
they
them to
even
go? Other than
petition,
to
they're going
go
against
to
their own petition. That's why it's so confusing.
Let's grab that.
All right. Frank,